Worried about letting someone else pick out the perfect avocado for your perfect impress them on the third date guacamole? Well, good thing Instacart shoppers are as picky as you are. They find ripe avocados like it's their guac on the line. They are milk expiration date detectives. They bag eggs like the 12 precious pieces of cargo they are. So let Instacart shoppers overthink your groceries so that you can overthink what you'll wear on that third date. Download the Instacart app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the extended free preview for this month's episode of What a Cartoon Movie, all about the live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, the very first one. I am one of your hosts for this one, the very Chevy Nova, Bob Mackey, and who is here with me today, as always?
Hey, it's Henry Gilbert, and Pizza Dude's got 30 seconds.
Yes, Michelangelo is anti-worker, but we are not. But we are also pro-turtle, which is why for this live-action month, the month of April, we are covering a real crowd pleaser, the very first live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Henry and I were there on the ground floor as 7-year-olds in 1990. And now we're bringing our adult knowledge to you because this was a very fun and tortured production that barely got made.
Yep, it is such an interesting independent production. It's got lots of fun warts and all to it, and a very complex production story that even includes the unexpected appearance of the supervillain of What a Cartoon Movie. It's all in there
Yes.
in our history.
You're going to hear a little portion of our very long 2-hour history of the movie. But if you want to hear the rest of the history and our full discussion of the movie, head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons and sign up at the $10 level. When you do, you'll unlock the rest of this podcast and also, I believe at this point, over 5 years of What a Cartoon Movie episodes. They're all between 3 to 6 hours long, covering the Disney Renaissance and Pixar and weirdo movies like the Beavis and Butthead movies, Rocko's Modern Life, Static Cling. We've done Studio Ghibli. We've done so many things over the past 5 years. And if there's something we haven't done, you bet your sweet Bippy we'll probably do it soon. And yes, that's all happening at the $10 level at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And when you sign up for the $10 level, you get all the $5 stuff, over 150 bonus podcasts. Henry, what's going on there?
Bob, you're referring to all of the great limited series and recurring monthly series we have done, covering things like Futurama and King of the Hill. You get a new Talking Futurama and Talk King of the Hill each month, and occasionally even a brand new episode of Batman the Animated Series, if you like all this 90s comic talk in this podcast. Plus, all of our previously released ones covering every episode of The Critic, every episode of Mission Hill, and many of our favorite episodes of Batman. The entire back catalog with hours upon hours of new stuff each month. In addition, when you go at that $10 level to hear the movie chat about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990.
And if you've never signed up for Patreon before, it's so easy to do. And when you sign up, you can listen to our bonus podcast alongside our free podcast the same way you listen to any podcast with whatever podcast app or device you might have. And there is an Patreon app for any smart device you might have, and you can listen to all of our content that way as well. But no matter which way you do it, it's very, very easy to access all the content waiting for you behind the Patreon paywall at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So without further ado, pull up your headphones that you stole with the Foot Clan and listen to this preview of our What a Cartoon Movie about TMNT 1990. The history of how this happened, it is very well documented all over the internet because it's a beloved film by many. And also, there's a lot of great, very dedicated Ninja Turtles fan pages and wikis out there that I appreciate for their stuff. But also in our new sourcing era, I want to say, one, the German DVD director's commentary, but the 2015 Hollywood Reporter oral history, and the 2020 oral history that was published on The Ringer by Alan Siegel, who is a nice guy. And he did a very good history that had some facts many places even the Hollywood Reporter missed out on. But I guess since we already did the pure history of the Turtles and how they got to be toys in a cartoon show, I think it's best to start with the director because I do think he is the key. If one person should get credit for why this movie is as good as it is, it's the director. Like he had a lot of great decisions that made it this.
I still don't really know who this guy is.
Well, you'll learn now, Bob. He's the Irish-British Nepo baby director, Steve Barron. I say that because his father was an actor, his mother was a director. He had an early in the world of filmmaking in England. But yeah, he's unforgettable to 90s kids and 80s kids for many reasons. Mainly, he, at least in the United Kingdom, was arguably the top music video director of the 1980s. Like, if you were directing a video in England, you wanted this guy.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list of music videos right now, and there's some very iconic ones. And actually, my wife and I have been watching her collection of those DVD collections that are organized by directors. Each director has their own DVD full of all of their videos with commentary, and just realizing how so many filmmakers just came from this world. At this point in time, I don't think that pipeline exists anymore.
No, yeah, it's I was thinking about this when Blank Check did their David Fincher series because they did a episode where they just did commentary over all of his major music videos, or maybe all of his music videos, and he was like, yeah, he was one of the best music video directors of his day, and he translated it into great films. Some can and some couldn't, but that doesn't make, like, Mark Romanek, I don't think did, or Romanek, I don't think he did any great movies, but his music videos are still unforgettable to me.
Hey, 1 Hour Photo is really good.
Oh, that is good. Okay, I take that back. I forgot that was him. But
it is fun. Like, I will say the Weezer videos on those DVDs, it's at a point in time where Rivers Cuomo is the most up his own ass. So every interview with him is just hilarious. He's just this little wispy nerd boy who's like, I didn't like what he wanted to do, but I guess people liked it.
Oh, man, that's, there's a little bit of that spirit that comes up in other parts of this history that I'm like, yeah, the guys who star in the music videos, they're either totally on the same wavelength as the director, or they have lead singer syndrome, and they don't like a director being the boss on a set and don't like listening to him. But so some of his first big hits, he did Toto's Africa video. Speaking of Weezer, the better version, Toto's Africa.
Oh yeah, the video where they play on top of a giant book.
Yes, yeah, I love that video. Like, it's very corny, but also it's like, I believe it's a 1982 or 83 music video. It's setting the tone for what's music videos. It seems corny now, even in the 90s it seemed corny, but it's a fun music video for Toto's Africa. And then if there wasn't Thriller, I think this would be the most famous Michael Jackson video, Billie Jean, of like him dancing down the light up streets. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that's Steve Barron as well. And he also did a ton of like British ones. This was also why New Wave got so big in America with British bands, because they were making more music videos.
I'm also seeing here he did the video for Take On Me, which is legendary. It's like could be the best music video of all time.
Yes,
or at least in the top 3.
So 83 is that Billie Jean music video. He does a bunch of other ones. 84, he gets to make his first movie, which is the what if a nerd had a computer that told him to date Virginia Madsen? Well, that would be Electric Dreams. It has a great trailer. I remember the actual movie's not that great.
Yeah, this is a corny classic that I hear a lot of people say is fun but not great. It's about an evil computer that ruins your dating life, I think.
Played by Bud Cort. Yeah.
From Harold and Maude?
The Harold and Maude, yes. Harold himself from Harold and Maude. He's the computer who is first going to help him start dating and then decides he doesn't like it and it causes problems. But yeah, it was a big box office flop, and Steve Barron feared he'd be put into director's jail forever after that. So he goes back to music videos. That's when he does Take On Me, which, yeah, one of the best music videos ever. But also in 85, he does the Money for Nothing Dire Straits music video also.
Hey, that brings us to Simpsons because David Silverman designed the characters in that video.
And this connects it to when we covered Reboot, because the people who made that are the seeds for what grows into Reboot. Steve Barron wasn't that involved in Reboot, but this is the reason he is an executive producer on the Reboot series as well.
Oh, really? Wow.
But then Steve Barron, he's a quality director, and he seemingly is good at working with lots of different people. 1986 brings him to a very important moment in his life. He is going to get to work with David Bowie on a music video for The song Underground, as featured in Jim Henson's Labyrinth.
Which song is that?
Underground, underground, get me out of here. That's the one.
Okay, got it.
The credit song, I think, is when.
Oh, no wonder I don't remember it, because it's not a performance, right?
Yes,
it's not
yeah.
performed in the movie. Okay.
By the way, I love Labyrinth. I have seen it in its an original print of it that played in San Francisco one time. It's great. Look, it's kind of corny, but I like it more than Dark Crystal. I think Dark Crystal too up its own ass in lore. Labyrinth more fun. But so David Bowie, the music video is actually not him playing his character from Labyrinth. It's actually him playing David Bowie, who basically in Take On Me style, he sort of becomes a sketchy cartoon character that gets teleported into the world of Labyrinth. And so it's all of the puppet characters from Labyrinth, including Hoggle, are chasing after him.
You know, I'm surprised I've never seen this, but I guess in its day, Labyrinth wasn't a big hit.
No, it was. It also, like, I never saw it until you talk about those music video collections. When I worked at a video store in 2007, I put on the David Bowie music video collection just as, easy background. You get to listen to David Bowie all day. And that one would come up, and the first couple of times I was like, right, I guess they did make music videos outside of the film for this. How do you like that? Now, apparently David Bowie himself thought it was kind of mid. He didn't particularly like the music video. But you know who did? Jim Henson. He thought this guy is great. I love Steve Barron's style. He can work with these puppets really good. And Jim Henson is trying to pitch a brand new TV series. In 1986, he wants somebody to help him with the pilot. Steve Barron is tapped to be the director of the pilot for The Storyteller.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's him.
Yes, he directs the pilot for The Storyteller, the Emmy-winning nightmare fuel Hans My Hedgehog, which I watched.
That's the one everyone
recently.
remembers. Sorry to interrupt you. That's the one everyone remembers for being the most nightmarish.
And it really, really is. I just rewatched it yesterday, and I think I started having to control my emotions, because I was like, oh yeah, this is reminding me of how scared it made me as a kid. It's like, it starts with a woman having a hedgehog human hybrid baby, and it gets worse from there. That his father, and it's just horrible abuse the entire episode. And it's a dark European. That's what Henson wanted. He wanted dark European sensibilities of Grimm's fairy tale type stuff.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, it was made for British television.
That he hoped to, they were the key financer. It's all British actors and writers and director in Barron's case. And, Henson used it as Barron directed the pilot. It is so heavily edited, and maybe that's because they have the Storyteller as an easy device. You just cut to John Hurt, and he's like, well, and then 20 years later, this sometimes the story doesn't flow that well, and you wonder if it's bad editing or just intentional.
Or not having the budget to depict certain things, I guess.
Steve Barron, I think, was used to having the deep pockets of record labels to pay for his music videos, and I do think he faced budget problems on his movies a lot, as we'll see in Ninja Turtles as well. So after the Storyteller's pilot gets sold, it gets 2 more episodes directed by Barron of its 8 episodes, Fear Not and Sap Sorrow, which are also very creepy. 2 of those, including the Hedgehog one, are written by the future Oscar-winning director of The English Patient, Anthony Minghella, as well, who is an important part of this story too. So that takes us up to 1987 with Steve Barron. Now it's 1988. Turtles, the cartoon, really starting to take off. It launched in 87. 88 is when it gets big. 89, it's getting even bigger. And the Konami video games are coming out too. So it's getting big with kids, but it can't be. It's the movie future not looking so good.
Yeah, if I recall the timeline, it's 87, late 87, you have the 5-part miniseries. 88, you get 13 weekly episodes. 89 is the full syndication push of 65. So that's the year, there's a big push for TV daily episodes. That's the year the video games come out. It's a peak year for Turtles, except the movie is the following year.
Yeah, that's why these fads usually, if they can stay big 3 years in a row, then it was a giant fad toy. Like if you get one Christmas, lots of fad toys have one Christmas. 2, you're doing pretty good. 3, then you're an unprecedented hit like the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, 89 gave us full turtle saturation, so we'd be prepared for a movie in 1990.
And a quick rundown of the key players in this who aren't Eastman and Laird, the creators of Turtles. You've got Mark Friedman, who is the savvy toy vet who hooked them up with Playmates and Fred Wolf to make the show and the toys. And Mark Friedman was their like entryway into Hollywood because he was, and honestly, like I think Mark Friedman, I said it before, I've seen him in videos call himself the fifth turtle. I'm like, you were a lucky guy who landed them and got them in meetings, and you collected a third of the pay, and then you stopped working with them in the early 90s, and you haven't had anything since.
And we all know the fifth turtle is actually Venus de Milo.
Boo. It's in the Toys That Made Us. That is what causes Eastman and Laird to break up. Apparently, Laird hated Venus de Milo.
We got to put breasts on these things now. Great.
but yeah. So Mark Friedman is having meetings with people all over town. This is where we bring in the now passed away professional surfer turned Hollywood agent Gary Proper. Now, Gary Proper, his big claim to fame at that point was Gallagher's manager and agent. So he was working with the big-time hit maker / future very sad man, Gallagher.
Yeah, I mean, that may be a funny fact now, but in 87, you wanted to be on the Gallagher train.
For sure. Like, and this is why Gallagher, late in life when he was mad at everybody, one of the things he was mad about was saying like, and I almost had a piece of the Turtles, and they kept me out of that. But I think that's wishful thinking on Gallagher's part. I think he just happened to be by Gary Proper as Gary was working on all of the Turtle deals.
I'll confess, as a kid, I loved Gallagher. I rented every Gallagher special at the video store.
If I saw it was playing on Comedy Central, I'd watch it all the way to the end. I loved it every time, yeah.
Oh, he's going to sit on the giant couch. I can't wait.
Now comes out the guy from Just the 10 of Us to pretend to be a typewriter. But so Gary Proper's his manager. And if you want to read some funny articles, you can read about his later war with Gallagher as Gallagher and him are kind of suing each other or sniping each other in the press for who owes people what. But so Gary sees the Turtles comic. He, early on, like I believe 86 or 87, he sees this Turtle comic and thinks, this could really be something. I think this could be a big movie. Apparently, the timeline is a little spongy here, but my impression is he seems to notice it before the toys, like just as a somewhat big in the indie comic space hit that most people have never heard of.
Yeah, and one factor that led to me appreciating the film is realizing that it's actually based on the comic book, which, as we covered in our What a Cartoon episode, that comic book was not available to children.
No.
You had a much softer, more colorful comic book on the shelves of your grocery store comic book rack. But the Eastman and Laird one, you have to have found a comic book shop, which was not, that's not on the map for me as a 7-year-old or 8-year-old.
You had to hope an older brother would let you read his copy. Or some friend's older brother would. Yeah, so Proper, though, he thought it could really be something. And so he had a friend named Cameron Kim Dawson, who was a one-time Disney exec, and both of them were like, this could really be something. We want to sell this to Hollywood. So Proper and Dawson then talked to Friedman. Friedman says to the Eastman and Laird, hey, we have a deal outside of the toy and cartoon deal I'm trying to make. I have these Hollywood guys who say they think they can make it into a movie. And again, these guys are the middlemen, and things don't happen without middlemen who get you into meetings. So I don't want to say they did nothing. But if Eastman and Laird didn't learn from guys like Jack Kirby who got ripped off, these fucking assholes would be the ones who stole the Turtles from Eastman and Laird. So I also don't want to be too nice to them. But yeah, so when Friedman brings Proper and Dawson in, Eastman and Laird are like, all right, they can try selling this movie, but we get final say on the script and we get actual real creative involvement.
No stealing. And the executives just tore off their hats and stomped on them. Oh,
fine. We'll only take a third of the money instead of 80%. So Eastman especially makes the point of like, everybody thinks, comic book movies, how they are today or even 30 years ago. But it's like, if you think of the mid 80s, you've got Superman 4, Swamp Thing, Howard the Duck, huge failures. And You have, as far as toys, comics that failed. You have Masters of the Universe that almost basically does kill Golden Globus in '87, and Garbage Pail Kids, a massive failure.
Yeah, even as a child, I knew it was beneath me, that film.
Oh, I still haven't watched any Garbage Pail Kids. I've seen clips in reviews.
I think I rented it just to see what could this possibly be, and I watched it just like, oh, you think I would like this? I may be 9, sir, but I have taste.
Well, yeah, just to let viewer or listeners know that I did have a teeny tiny amount of taste as a kid. I saw Masters of the Universe in '87 at 5 years old in theaters. I did not like it. It did bore me. TMNT was so much better than it. But so, because I was having this chat with my husband, he was saying, like, why would somebody say no to making a Turtles movie when it's the biggest toy around? And I told him, like, He-Man before that was the biggest toy around and did terrible as a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, the two guys who got the rights to shop around to the studios a Ninja Turtles movie said they were getting nothing. Every studio, they said every studio looked at them like they had lobsters coming out of their ears, was how it was described. They all turned it down. Even as the cartoon started to gain traction, they're just like, a turtle movie? What? So if everybody in Hollywood's saying no, what about in Hong Kong? Bum, bum, bum. Here's some quick Hong Kong movie history for folks out there. At one time, the Shaw Brothers was the biggest studio of motion pictures made in specifically the Hong Kong region of China, which at that time was, I believe, a sort of British colony. Definitely the Brits still had an interest in it, and mainland China wouldn't get ownership of it until '97. So, but this isn't a history of Hong Kong. But from the Shaw Brothers, two guys of their top producers quit that and wanted to start a competing company. They call that company Golden Harvest, and they pay their stars better. They give them a lot more free reign. They are known as the better place to work at than Shaw Brothers, though Golden Harvest is full of like terrible treatment of its stuntmen and all that. It's hardly that good. But Golden Harvest, they are the first believers in Bruce Lee. They make Bruce Lee a star. They even start working on American films. They're like, oh, well, they make that Enter the Dragon film, which does very well. Unfortunately, Bruce Lee doesn't live to see its release, so that really kind of fucks up Golden Harvest's plans. And then they start even working with Jackie Chan, and he gets big, and they try to sell him overseas. That's why Golden Harvest makes those Cannonball Run films, like partially to try to launch Jackie Chan.
You know, I'm only watching these Hong Kong movies from the 80s for the first time in my life, and from the 70s too. And I can't help but think, why did you keep these from me? I think they were just jealous, where we can't do action this crazy. Let's hide these. Only weirdos with catalogs can watch these films.
I am very lucky. I had a friend who introduced me to Ranma One Half, and then many of these classic 70s and 80s and 90s Hong Kong action films, as we referred to them back then. And so I fortunately do know them, but yeah, they were incredibly hard. And that was only because my friend knew to go to a certain store that sold bootlegs in a Chinatown in northern Florida. But so Golden Harvest, they kept trying to really become an international film company. They didn't just want to be about Hong Kong. And Jackie Chan also wanted to be a Hollywood movie star. He made that movie, The Big Brawl, or also it's called like Battle Creek City, I believe is an alternate title for it. But it's crazy to think that Jackie had all these attempts, but it was only thanks to the Weinstein brothers' marketing of him that he finally became a thing in America.
And hey, future Splinter, Jackie Chan.
That's true. And man, it's all connected. Yeah. But partially to distribute films overseas and to try to make a dent in America, Golden Harvest does have a arm in North America, in Los Angeles. And so they're trying to work on some films. And the boss of Golden Harvest at that time is a man named Thomas Gray. And he knows just the thing that's going to make Golden Harvest popular in America. He loves the BBC sitcom Are You Being Served? And he's going to make it work for America.
Oh, boy. I mean, maybe I could appreciate that now as an adult. but the second Red Dwarf ended, that theme song started up, and I was just scrambling for the remote, much like when MASH would come on late at night. Like, no, get away from MASH.
That just the sound of the registers going off. It's
Yes.
like that. Yeah.
Like Pavlovian response after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I wonder how non-American listeners, especially in British areas, like what do they reflect on Are You Being Served As? Because to us, it really was just like packaged with the fancier, nerdier stuff like Monty Python and Red Dwarf as equal on PBS in America.
It was basically Pardon My Zinger.
So they're working on making it into a movie called Department Store. Wow, how exciting. And so working on that script is a 70s comedian turned sitcom writer, Bobby Herbeck. And Bobby Herbeck worked on Different Strokes, The Jeffersons, Small Wonder. I would bet he was friends with or knew Mike Scully. I would bet him and Mike Scully were buddies.
Based on which sitcom?
Small Wonder.
Oh, no. Mike Scully was Out of This World.
Oh, God. My bad. All right.
It's about the space girl, not the robot girl.
Oh, how can I get those confused?
I see. I watched a ton of Out of This World. I have never seen 1 second of Small Wonder. That was kept from me, and I'm grateful.
So Herbeck says he's hating working on Department Store, and he's more than happy to talk about his involvement in the Turtles film. Well, honestly, I think he overrates it. But so Herbeck, he knows Gary Proper and Kim Dawson, and also Gallagher because he's from the same class of comedian. And so Herbeck is working at Golden Harvest. He's the guy who says, pitch this to Golden Harvest with me. I'll write it. And I'm sick of working on this Are You Being Served thing, so help me pitch it. And I'm sure Gallagher's around in these meetings too, but Gallagher, before he died, he seemed to think he was part of those meetings and had a piece of it.
That's right. His many complaints late in life about how he could have gotten that sweet, sweet Turtles money.
That was one of the most shocking parts of his famous Mark Maron interview. Him saying the Turtles, like, what? Turtles? Huh?
That's the second most famous part. The first most famous part is, come on, Gallagher. Get back here, Gallagher. Oh, he's gone.
That's his legacy. That's that old asshole's legacy, man. Okay, so Herbeck's getting in meetings with Golden Harvest, but Thomas Gray still thinks it's stupid. This is 1988, coincidentally, as the toys are starting to take off. And as the story goes, they tell, after a couple more meetings with Thomas Gray, who keeps turning him down, they tell Gray, ask your kids if you should make a Ninja Turtles movie. And Gray said he did, and his kids told him, you have to make a Turtles movie. They were that excited about it. And that's when Thomas Gray finally goes like, oh, all right, okay.
The kids have spoken.
So he is able to get a green light from his big boss, Raymond Chow. Hollywood Reporter even gets a date for it. They say they have a June 13th, 1988 memo of Raymond Chow approving a $3 million pre-production investment and gets them to start selling it to distributors. Though Gray also has a very, just to let you know the level he thought this movie was going to be at, here's a quote from Gray on how he imagined it from the Hollywood Reporter. Wait a minute. This is nothing more than 4 of our Chinese stuntmen in rubber suits. We can make this movie for peanuts in Hong Kong. So imagine that originally this was just going to be 4 guys in a mobile rubber suits kicking people, and it'd be a pretty bad movie.
With no robot heads.
None of those emoting robot heads. Yeah, and Herbeck is very funny because as he remembers it, he's like, Eastman and Laird were a little too precious. They didn't like any of my ideas. They kept looking at their shoes when I was talking to them. And from Eastman and Laird's side, they're like, yeah, his script sucked. He didn't get what's special about the Turtles. Like, he was a sitcom guy who wrote bad jokes.
Yeah, I mean, credit to them for having dignity and not willing to just take whatever paycheck came their way.
Yeah, they actually cared about having a good movie. Like, they were sick of seeing bad movies, and they also, thank God, they kept all of their rights to this stuff and could do that. Like, again, if Eastman and Laird didn't do that, this would just been a shitty movie that would have been made as fast as possible by Golden Harvest, like all the other horrible comic book adaptations. So Herbeck gets written out of it, but he still gets to have co-writing credit and the money, so he can't complain too much. In all the versions of the script, by the way, this is a quick aside. In all the versions of the script, this is something to say about how they took it from the comics. Well, the love of pizza, April working as a news reporter, their colored bandanas, saying cowabunga, and more of their personalities, that is much more from the cartoon than the comic book.
Yeah, you know what? You are correct now that I think about it. When I walked away from the movie upon my last viewing, I thought, I think the 10% of this that's like the cartoon made me wonder why the other 90% wasn't like the cartoon.
It seemed like they took the spongy things that they're like, well, Mattel, not Playmates and Fred Wolf can't sue us over this. They can't sue us over the word cowabunga, but they could sue us if we put Bebop and Rocksteady in this, who never appeared in the comics. But they have all of this stuff that is clearly from the cartoons. And the late David Wise, who listeners from that What a Cartoon will remember, was the showrunner of the original Turtles cartoons. There's this one classic interview where he's like, I'm not bitter, but and it's funny you mentioned that poster, Bob, because this is actually what he complained about when describing the original poster. He said, David Wise said, quote, "It shows them coming out of the sewer and it says, 'Hey dude, this is no cartoon.' Well, dude, you wouldn't be saying dude if I hadn't started saying that in the cartoon. That really pissed me off."
He was right.
Yeah, no, all of the surfer guy personality, that is not on the comic page.
Honestly, I think the tagline is obviously a way to let people know this is not the thing you're getting on TV for free. This is something different.
It's their way of saying, in case, because the poster is not in motion, and you might think, the poster, in case you don't know, is them peeking out from under the sewer grate, so you don't really see them because you're supposed to pay money to see them. You don't want to give it away on the poster. But then when they show that little, then I guess they do have to go like this. Hey guys, this isn't a cartoon, by the way. This isn't like the Heathcliff compilation movies that Decrypt you off with.
Yeah, I guess animated movies were coming out of their bad reputation at the time.
Coming out of their shell? No.
Why not?
So, okay, this is where Anthony Minghella comes back into the story in a very surprising way. And again, this is the late director of The English Patient and of many classic films. But at the time, he was a screenwriter first, and he was working at Golden Harvest, trying to do punch-up on a script that I've seen called A Night in Bangkok, which I have no clue what it is. I wondered if it was like an adaptation of the concept album One Night in Bangkok that has the classic corny song. But whatever he was working on called A Night in Bangkok, he's in the Golden Harvest office. He hears about their Turtles plan, and he's like, oh, this is like a puppety live action thing? I know just the guy who I just worked with on The Storyteller, Steve Barron.
Wow, so Anthony Minghella is the connection there.
Yes, if Anthony Minghella wasn't working in Hollywood on a Golden Harvest thing, then Steve Barron would not have been even gotten a call to be brought in. And it totally makes sense. His music videos, like, that's very impressive. Like, internationally, you can see why the Golden Harvest team would have seen on either coast would have been like, wow, these famous music videos that everybody's heard of, and he'll direct our movie? That's awesome.
Also, the understanding was probably, kids love those damn things.
Yes, yeah. And we want teenage cool guys, and this guy makes things for cool teens. And on top of that, Barron was really wanting to get back into making a full theatrical film, and I think he knew to get another shot, he was going to have to do this. Like, he needed to take on a Golden Harvest kids film if he wanted to get back into the movies. So Barron signs on to do it. He agrees to do it. It sounded like it wasn't much of a like it didn't take a lot of time. And once he signs on, this is where Barron identifies that, and this is why I think out of anybody who could have taken that job then, Barron was probably the best, because unlike I think everybody else who made comic book movies back then, he actually read the comic books and liked them. He was like, I want to make this comic book. We're taking from the comic books. Let's read the comic books. And so if you read the original 12 Turtles comics, you can pick out 40 pages that are this movie. Now, that's across a lot of weird shit, but there are 40 pages that are this movie.
Yeah, it does seem like he loved the comics, and not in the way people have to pretend to love the comics when they're on press junkets.
For sure.
Like, oh yeah, I love what's that say? Oh, Madam Web, favorite character of mine.
By the way, I just heard Bobby Moynihan say this story that he's a real comic nerd. He said that despite what some may assume about her, that Megan Fox was a real comic nerd fan, and when she hosted SNL one year, years before she was April O'Neil in the movie, that she said to him, "Oh, you like comics? You like Eastman and Laird? My dream is to be April O'Neil."
And it came true twice.
And it turned into a nightmare. But so yeah, Steve Barron actually read the comics and gave a shit. He was not saying, "Oh, this is like, a dumb kids cartoon about stupid turtles. Who gives a shit?" Like, when he met with Eastman and Laird, they loved him because he came in with noted copies of their comics, where he's like, "Okay, so this page will be this scene, and then this page is that scene." And also they really respected him because he hired British comic artist Brendan McCarthy, who was doing some really good stuff with Peter Milligan on 2000 AD. And he worked with Barron on The Storyteller. He's the storyboarder for it. He'd go on to, McCarthy would be a major storyboarder on Reboot, and also co-writer, storyboarder of Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, wow.
A lot of major people worked on this that I was not keeping track of, or was not aware of. But Barron had the funny story of meeting with McCarthy and saying, "Hey, do you want to help me with making the boards for this movie? Have you heard of the Turtles?" And McCarthy, being a comic professional, knew exactly who they were and was very excited to do it. So yes, he comes in with all these scenes from the Mirage comics, where you got, say, a rooftop battle, a battle in April's apartment, a trip to the countryside to reach Charge, Splinter being kidnapped, Raph versus Casey Jones. All these big moments that you mix and match in the movie, and it works to be a real movie. That, of course, though, meant Herbeck's script went down the toilet, and Steve Barron's like, "Thank you very much, flush." And instead, they needed to tap a new screenwriter real fast, and they got a guy who was fresh off of the Wonder Years, Todd Langen. So if you think this movie feels like it was written by two 80s sitcom guys, that's why it is.
Hey, at that point, a very acclaimed sitcom.
No, this was a trade up from Different Strokes. No offense to Different Strokes, but Wonder Years is a better show.
I don't think it ever wasn't acclaimed, because it was only around for 6 years and just won a boatload of Emmys.
No, I remember loving it as a kid too, when I didn't know any of the references. But yeah, so Langen works with him over a feverish few weeks at a fancy LA hotel. They have funny stories of him. Langen says like he was poolside acting out how Splinter defeats Shredder, because like Barron apparently couldn't conceive, like, all right, how does the rat beat Shredder anyway? And Langen apparently acts it out by the poolside. Barron's big vision, though, he said he wanted a kid's film that was more grounded. He didn't want all the blood and dismemberment that was in the comics, but he wanted it to be PG, but he did want violence. He didn't want it to be just a cartoon.
We still want to crush a man on screen.
Oops. As long as you say oops, it's PG.
That makes it into a joke.
He cited two major tonal sources for him, too. One, he grew up watching Three Musketeers films a ton as a kid, and he's like, yeah, it's sword guys having adventures. These are just ninjas instead of musketeers.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, they're fighting enemies and making little quips while they do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. What if there were 4 musketeers?
And the other thing he mentioned, too, who's 4 guys who have adventures with weird things in New York City in a kind of grounded, gritty way in the 80s? The Ghostbusters. So he was looking at both of those things.
I bet every kid in 1990 wanted them to cross over. And I assume, just going to assume, there's at least 3 comic books where they do.
And toys.
Oh yeah, they're toys. There are toys of the Ghostbusters crossover.
The Ninja Turtles will cross over with anybody for the right money. Like my husband actually bought, I think, almost the full collection of the Power Rangers meet Ninja Turtles toys that they put out a few years ago. I just saw the other day that they announced like it's basically the turtle van that is a transformer, and the real trick of it is it comes with 4 different interchangeable heads. So basically the van turns into a turtle and you put the turtle head and weapons on them. But if you're a real crazy collector who wants to have all 4 turtles, well, you got to buy it 4 times.
Jesus. I want to tell our listeners that when I said there was probably a crossover, I assumed there was just one thing that happened once. Just upon a cursory search, I'm seeing frankly too much Ninja Turtle Ghostbuster crossover to the point where I'm going to say enough. But if you make a I don't know, a seventh film after Frozen Empire, throw the turtles in there. Who cares?
Get Sony to deal with Paramount to make it happen. And also Barron said the tone of it was similar to The Storyteller. They were darker myths, but still for families. And yeah, I think some of that upsetting tone is a little there in TMNT. But okay, so what Golden Harvest has in mind is stuntmen in crappy suits, and you film it cheap. How does Jim Henson's not cheap company get in there? Well, of course, that's almost all Steve Barron's doing. Jim Henson loves Steve Barron. That's what many people say this in the histories of like, yeah, Jim Henson loves Steve Barron. He loved working with him. He trusted him. That's why an unprecedented thing happened of making the deal to have the turtle costumes be made by Jim Henson's Creature Workshop. To be extremely pedantic about it, some people will say this is the first time it ever was on a non-Henson movie. But technically, the French production of the film The Bear from 1987 has animatronic bears in it built by Jim Henson.
If you didn't point that out, someone else would have, so you're right to do so.
Also, I got to tell some writers of incorrect wikis who say that Return to Oz was a Creature Shop related production. No, they hired many Henson Company vets who had left Creature Shop and did build puppets for it, but it was not the Creature Shop. Just like how Little Shop of Horrors hired a bunch of Henson people but did not work with the Creature Shop to make its puppets. So distinct.
We're tasking all of our $10 patrons to go out and correct those wikis for us.
Please. And I dug deep into this. I never watched that movie, The Bear, as a kid. It looked too scary, like big bears yelling at each other in a movie.
I don't even recall what this was.
It's one of those fake nature movies that were all the rage in the 80s where like they,
like
I don't
Milo
want to say
Notice?
exactly, yeah, it's sort of like that, except about bears in apparently the British Columbian countryside. So it's French people in BC filming bears and calling it a movie.
Well, whenever I record, I'm looking out at the mountains of British Columbia, one of many mountains, and I'm just wondering how many big feet and bears are just out there in the woods, and I just can't see them.
But other than The Bear, Jim Henson Creature Workshop had never worked on a non-Henson production before this movie. And when Steve Barron comes to him in, I believe, late 88, he's presenting to Jim Henson the comic pages and his storyboards, and Henson isn't a fan of how bloody the comics were. He doesn't like the violence. I could never find a real actual quote of Jim Henson said this was too violent. That's one of those bullshit lies you see on the internet of they actually toned it down because Jim Henson didn't like the violence in the first movie. Jim Henson was fucking dead a month after the movie came out.
Yeah. I actually recall I saw this for my birthday in May, and probably a week later was his passing in mid-May.
Yeah, exactly. It was 6 weeks after the movie came out. So
and then the turtles were his pallbearers. If you watch that funeral video.
But yeah, so this is late 88. Barron shows him this stuff, but he tells him, trust me, this won't be too bad. It's not going to besmirch the name Henson. And Henson did trust him. Though there's, I think, two bits that are not talked about in all these things about how Barron landed Jim Henson. It wasn't just like a handshake deal. First off, as you know, Bob, you've read the Henson biography or gone through a ton of it. The late 80s are not great for Henson money-wise. He would take on a job like this.
Yeah, just trying everything. We talked about Labyrinth. We talked about The Dark Crystal. Those were not bombs in the way we view a bomb today, but they really underperformed. He wanted to get away from the Muppets, but they just kept pulling him back because people wanted him to do the thing they liked the most. They didn't want all this new adult stuff from Jim Henson.
So of course, he want a cash infusion of $3 million to make these turtle puppets on a thing he trusted. And another part of it that I don't think is talked about enough in how Barron landed it is that Brian Henson was a big believer in the project and wanted to work on it. So I think he was also telling his dad, no, Dad, let's do this. I think this can work. It's not going to be too violent. Brian Henson is second unit director on this movie, though Bob did a whole great biography on him on our Muppet Christmas Carol.
That's right. That was the first film he ever directed at age 27.
But he was getting practice on this movie in 89.
Hmm. To be fair, he was working on movies as a child
That's true.
on his dad's movies, so he was just living in the world of filmmaking.
So by most accounts, Steve Barron does think he got Henson friend prices, though it was still $3 million. Like they are the movie stars in this movie is their puppet suits. Like in Golden Harvest, seriously was like, we cannot afford Jim Henson. And Barron was able to convince him like, if Jim Henson wants to do this, you pay what he can do because this makes this a real movie. Like the Garbage Pail Kids movies or say Gwildor in Masters of the Universe look like shit because they didn't have Jim Henson's company building them.
Yeah, and I know you're going to get to this, Henry, but just based on what I was reading about Jim Henson and the Muppets and doing my research for the Muppet Christmas Carol podcast, they had really been experimenting with radio-controlled puppets since the maybe second Muppet movie. So this is the result of 10 years of experimentation. And then the next year we'd have Dinosaurs, which is basically, what if what we did here was a TV show?
Yeah, this was a real Creature Shop R&D thing for them. Like they got to build upon what they've been doing. So yeah, you can see radio controlled full bodied suits. Like full body suits are as old as Big Bird, or no, older than Big Bird. I think that Chinese dragon for the commercials they've done is actually an older full body suit. But this would be their first where you don't have a hand and one arm that doesn't move. Both arms can move because the face is radio controlled by a hand puppet off screen. And it is a highly choreographed, multi-synced character act out.
And you stick a man in there who doesn't mind dying inside of a little prison.
Yes. Like you can see earlier examples of this, like the poor little person who has to play Hoggle in Labyrinth is in one of those things. Or everybody who played the giants in Fraggle Rock, those type of suits. Or the bears in the later Muppets Take Manhattan, suits like that.
Oh wait, let me go back and correct myself. They were working on radio controlled puppets as far back as Emmett Otter, Jugman Christmas.
Right.
I just rewatched that last Christmas, and I watched the extras, and that was really the first time they were doing it. And you can see their efforts when the Muppets are going down the water and they're being controlled by radio controls, not a person's hand.
Right. Yes, yeah, the same. And with the Doozers had the same stuff in Fraggle Rock also. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what the Henson Company is going to build, they have to build 4 distinct turtle suits. Then they have to build a complex, though more traditional, Splinter puppet. Then they're going to build 4 baby turtle puppets and a rat puppet for the flashbacks. And they have to build
baby turtles. Sorry.
And they have to build machine-free suits that stuntmen can wear in fight scenes. And the puppets were using what was called the Super Waldo tech, which was called the same for the CGI puppet you saw in the Jim Henson Hour or the Muppet Vision 3D.
Right. It was the CGI guy, right?
Yes, yeah. So Super Waldo, they also came up with a really clever thing in the design. Thanks to the turtle shells, their backpack is the costume. You can hide all of their stuff in their turtle shells. So, though, like you were saying, Bob, if you're a performer, think of it this way. You're basically wearing a helmet that's a 1989 computer, and the rest of it is on your backpack. Then that's covered in foam and plastic that covers every inch of your body, except for tiny holes right below the mask line for the eyes and a little bit in the mouth for your face to come out. Now you have to do that acting in middle of North Carolina summer in crazy humidity.
That's right. This was the weird North Carolina film boom, which is why this and I think The Wizard and Super Mario Brothers are all filmed around that area.
It's thanks to tax problems of a certain other filmmaker, but yeah, it's honestly it sounds like the people who got to play the dinosaurs a year later in 91 had it a lot easier in a controlled LA set than the Turtles did.
Air conditioned sets. Was there air conditioning or some kind of cooling system in the suits at this point?
Apparently they didn't get installed until midway through the filming. There are stories from a couple of the actors saying that the first day of filming they did 36 takes of one scene, and by the middle of the scenes Raphael's actor in particular was saying, "Get his fucking head off of me right now!" Right, he is going crazy.
I think you're going to point this out, Henry, but now I'm remembering there are some shots where you can see like sweat flying out of the costumes.
Yes. Yeah, they were apparently they said they lost like they were 5 to 10 pounds lighter at the end of every day. They sweat it all out every day. It's the turtle diet. If you want to lose 20 pounds fast, star in a Ninja Turtles movie.
You love podcasts, the stories, the laughs, the unexpected turns. But when this episode ends, the silence starts. Not anymore. Audiobooks.com turns that silence into your next great adventure. With over 450,000 titles, from bestsellers to hidden gems, your love for listening just found its new best friend. And because you already know the joy of audio, we're giving you 3 free audiobooks to start your journey. Imagine your favorite podcast, now with unlimited episodes. That's audiobooks.com. Keep the story going. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. Because for podcast lovers like you, the end of an episode is just the beginning. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.